And when do you want to do the raffle? At the end of the presentation?
I have an announcement. You'll have till we draw to get tickets, but I am donating 5 tablets of fertilizer for water lilies. That's about a $5 value there. A 10-pack, that's more like a $10 value. A free water lily, tropical, hardy, or lotus, while supply. The lotus go quickly, so I'm actually waiting on a shipment of those right now. And then also, and that's a $50 value, plus or minus 20, depending on which one you pick. And then also the big package, between $75 and $100 will be a free small pond pack. That will include a water lily, a bog/marginal plant, some floater plants if you want water hyacinth, water lettuce, whatever we have in stock at the time. So that's pretty cool. So all 4 of those will be in the drawing as well. Yeah, so. All right, there we go.
Okay.
Oh, you do have to come and pick them up unless you want to pay for shipping, but we can ship them too. But.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to announce? Well, I'll turn it over to William.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. So obviously everybody here has a pond, right? We're all in the, maybe got some people planning. Yeah, right? So I'm William Rudder. I am the vice president of the Pond Club, but new to this year being the vice president. And then also I am the owner operator of my small backyard water plant business where we sell locally to some of you guys have been to the house and got some plants. Then we also ship all over the United States, including Hawaii and Puerto Rico when they let us through. So we got just kind of a backyard hobby that helps pay some of the bills of the turtle and koi pond. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to go through, some of it might sound kind of, basic if you've been in the hobby for a while, but for those of you that are new, I still get questions and even some misinformation sometimes shared. So I just wanted to go through today and talk about, why use plants in your pond? Where do I put the plants in your pond? Types of pond plants. Where do you buy the plants is another question I get pretty often. And then also have a couple, and we'll, by the way, we'll have feedback, and if you have questions throughout, just raise your hand or shout it out. If it pertains to what we're talking about right then, we'll answer it. If it's later, I'll say, hey, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But got a couple of things here that I'm labeling problem/pest. So we got a couple of videos on here on some of those things. So we'll get to those as we go through them. And like I said, if you have any questions as we're going, it's pretty informal. So just let me know. So the first one is why use plants in your pond? And this is going to be interactive. So if I ask a question, what do you guys think are some of the benefits of having plants in your pond? Aeration, right? Beauty. Color. Yeah, got some green water right now in my turtle and koi pond because there's not a lot of plants and the bog is on its way back from the winter freeze. So yeah. Where do you put the plants? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed my place in the slide. There we go. So we answered those questions, right? And no wrong answers, so good job there. The pond needs the plants. We talked about that as part of the cycle. If you visit any natural pond locally or even man-made pond, like some of the reservoirs, most of the time they don't plant those plants there, but they end up there, right? So plants and water go together. Somebody mentioned in the back, you've got a hole in the ground filled with water. Let's put some pretty plants in there, make it beautiful. There's an example. That could have just been a hole in somebody's yard or like Larry had, a indention where some water kind of retained there. But you've got a nice spot there now filled with plants and wildlife. You see there's a duck and looks like a vicious little alligator there. Full disclosure, I stole all these pictures off the internet. So right now, my pond got hit pretty hard with the freeze this year. So other than my water lettuce pond and some, a few water lilies just now starting to bounce back, everything got pretty cold. Since we deal with mostly tropicals, they did not like the cold this year. So I did, if this is your pond, you're like, oh, well, that's my pond. So it came off the internet. So there's another good one. This actually happens to be from Aquascapes. I'm a big fan of Greg Wittstock and the Aquascapes. If you're on YouTube, they have a couple of different channels, very educational, very informative, very entertaining as well. Especially see a grown man jump in a pond full of fish and plants with snorkel on and an iPhone waterproof. So it's pretty awesome. Filtration, somebody said earlier, the pond, even if you don't have many fish in there, the pond is still going to produce nutrients, and the plants are a way to get rid of some of those nutrients or to filter the pond. This is an example of a bog, and I like this one because it's not an entire bog separate from the pond. They're actually using the pond shelf when they built their pond to where they do have that the plants along the edge, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and some tips and tricks on that in a minute. It also offers shelter for small fish. These are actually some killifish. I put those on there. That is taken from an inside aquarium, but there are actually several species of killifish that can live over the winter, including the American flagfish, which is the only native killifish to North America. It's actually found all along the coastal bend into Florida and places like that as well. And then killifish by their nature, a lot of them actually are annual fish. I know that sounds crazy, but they only live about a year. So, if you're looking for a smaller pond fish or maybe a patio pond fish, they can be, as you see here, very beautiful from both the side view and the top view, which is what we're focusing on as pond owners. It can be a visual barricade from predators. So if you have predators in your neighborhood, I'm not going to guarantee this stops a raccoon or a hawk from getting to your fish. But if the hawks and raccoons cannot see the fish, they're going to have a harder time getting to them. Here's another version of that with some comets there, just showing you, hey, look, they go together, plants and fish inside your pond. So you can also grow your own food. Does anybody have any edible plants in their pond? What do you have?
Mints.
Okay, yes, that's my favorite. Watercress and mints. I love mojitos, so mint is always good. Lotus. Yeah, so did y'all know you could eat lotus? Yeah, you didn't know. So lotus, and I should have put a picture of it, sold at a lot of Asian markets, Asian food stores or Asian restaurants as well. It looked like little potato chips and have little holes in them. That's actually a lotus chip. So now, full disclosure, check with a professional before you start eating things in your pond, because some of them are not edible. Some of them are not edible for your animals. So, be careful. Don't just start feeding things to your chickens and your dogs and your cats. But, and there, I actually found a nice, the plants we're about to see, I actually found a thing on Pinterest where somebody had gone through and shown the plants, and it's just a handful of them, but there's many types. Also, you can grow normal things that we eat also in the water, aquaponics, right? So any of those things, you could actually set up a bog where like you have a tomato pot in there. Has anybody put, normal food in their pond? And mint, yeah? What did you have?
I had tomatoes.
Tomatoes. Did that work out for you?
Yeah, they were okay.
Yeah.
I think they were in too deep of water.
Yes. So sometimes you can literally take the plant in the pot and sit it like in a ½ inch of water in your bog, and that's what they call being partially wet, because some of those things like tomatoes and cucumbers, even though we see them growing them in hydroponic systems, some of them do not like to be wet. They like to have their roots go down and find the water. So a couple of things there, just search around the internet, found some videos on that. There's a guy down in Australia that does tons of stuff, including bananas and papaya and some things like that in there. So pretty awesome. So here's some of the plants that I discovered that are edible there. So a couple of things. We got some mint, watercress. This is sweet flag, flowering rush, Perkleweed or Perkle Rush. That comes in 3 different varieties, red or pink, white, and blue. So actually, all of the parts of that are edible, including the seeds that it puts off in the summertime. You can just literally, as you're walking around the pond, pick them off and eat them. They're kind of a little bit of like a lettucey flavor, a little nutty. So again, you know, I've reached in the pond and grabbed things and eaten them before. This is a type of Sagittaria. We do actually have a couple of native versions of that in Texas. It's also called duck potato. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. That's our mint. And then this one here is taro. Now this is where on our group, on other groups on the internet, when someone says elephant ears, they almost always mean taro. And the reason I'm a real stickler on that is that taro is edible when it's cooked. So has anybody ever eaten poi in Hawaii? Yeah, so that's actually the potato that this grows from. It's very important, and they'll tell you this at the luau, that you're supposed to cook it. If you don't cook it, you actually end up with almost like eating fiberglass. So don't go in there and start eating it raw, right? Potatoes you can eat raw, not these. And that's why it's very important to know the differences, again, before you start eating things, kind of like mushroom gathering. You know, if it is elephant ear, no matter how long you cook it, you cannot eat it. It will be like eating fiberglass. Another version of this is taro balls. So if you eat or you drink bubble tea, which is I've seen like has become recently more popular here, there are taro flavors. It's almost always purple. And that stems from like Southeast Asia, Philippines area. So a lot of the Asian and Asian Pacific countries and people consume taro in some form or another. And it's getting more and more popular here in America. So the other question I get is, where do I plant them? And sometimes, you know, misplanting a water lily, for example, or a marginal plant, or like you said, tomatoes, can end up in it being a negative result. And we try our best. You know, plants are living things, and sometimes they're hard to keep living. So, you know, we try our best to educate customers and friends where they should plant the pond. So in general, there's 5 different zones. And, you know, this is technically outside the pond, but what you may or may not know is that there's microclimates around your pond. So in the middle of the summer, you may notice that the rest of the grass is starting to turn brown, but around the pond, it's actually still green, and you haven't actually watered it. And that's because there's humidity right there from the pond. And even in the driest summertime, if you were to dig that pond and drain it out and start taking the liner out, you'll see that it's moist and cool under there. So those are things that a lot of these plants love. And I always encourage you, if you have a plant that you love, that in the summertime, you've got to stay on top of watering it, try putting it in the ground beside your pond and see if it does better without you having to intervene as much, because they typically do pretty well. And you may see some of the plants, some of the bog plants we're going to talk about in a little bit, and say, well, I've got that in my front yard and it's not a pond. Yeah, some of the plants grow in and out of the pond, just depending on their moisture levels. So we have zone 2 and 3 here. Those are going to be for our marginal or bog plants. You notice some of the smaller ones like iris, that right there is about 6 inches deep or less. So that's barely enough to, you know, cover up the very bottom of the plant. Most of those plants don't grow more than about 1 foot tall, so you don't want to submerge it. Yes, ma'am?
How do you suggest bringing up, if you bog is 1 foot above, do you suggest maybe getting a tall clay pot?
Yeah.
And putting it in
Yeah.
there and then lifting it up?
That works well. Those tend to be a little more expensive. They are pretty. The $1 and $2 cinder blocks, those work well as well. I have those because my turtle pond and koi pond is above ground 30 inches, and it's just straight walls. Great for predators, bad for plants. So I do have multiple of those.
And you wrap it
So-
in pond liner or something like that so they don't scrape your...
Oh, yes, put some type of pond liner or pond protectant under it. Yes. I thought some people are worried about like the concrete leaching into the pond and things like that. Yes, it does, but at the same time, unless you're filling your pond with it, then it's typical. And I've put cylinder blocks in ponds, you know, as small as 100 gallons, and 1 cylinder block has affected it. So if you're worried about that, you can always get older concrete blocks, or ones that you've had in the yard or something like that. Only thing I'd worry about is if somebody has sprayed something on it. But typically that over years that should have gone away. Yeah. So, but there's all kinds of, again, mentioning the tomato plants, that'd be a perfect thing to put in like a really decorative pot. We're talking about patio ponds towards the end. That can be in on your patio, but also can be in your pond. So I had some questions last meeting about koi eating the water lilies, even lotuses and things like that. And that can be an issue, but you could certainly kind of make its own little area in a decorative pot. I've actually got some fountains that I made that way as well. So zone 3 is going to be for those deeper marginals, things like cattails, thalia. I'm talking plants that go over 3 feet tall. Planting them as deep as 16 inches from the top of the pot. That's the depth we're given here. Those are going to be just fine. Now, again, we'll talk about that in a moment, but if they're small, you want to start them off gradually. You don't want to submerge the whole thing. So we're talking about mature heights here. My favorite is the water lilies. I think, if you don't have them, they will provide a lot of joy in your pond. This is at least 16 inches above the top of the pot. Depending on the tropical or hardy, I would plant them in a different type of pot. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but the water height again is over the top of the pot at 16 inches. Now we grow ours in 20-inch deep water, and that does include the bottom of the pot. So they're probably right around 16 inches. Now the problem would be if you bought a water lily from us or wholesale or anybody online that's growing them by the pond full to sell, we're only going to grow them in about 2 feet of water, mainly for shipping. Because if they get too big, then you're going to get a bunch of broken leaves and things like that. So we try to keep them small, and because of the spread, we're trying to control that so we can have more plants per square foot. But in this case, what you would want to do is if you got this, and let's say your pond's 4 feet deep, many water lilies, especially the larger ones, can do just fine in 4 feet deep water. But what you want to do is, again, maybe start them off in the 16-inch water first. And then use some cylinder blocks. Another thing you use like the black file crates or the vegetable bins, which sometimes end up on the side of the highway when they blow out of people's trucks. Nobody in a yellow Camaro has ever stopped on the side of the road to grab a free tomato bin. I've got a stack of them at the house. My wife's like, "Wow, where do these come from? Why do you keep getting them?" I was like, "I pick them up on the side of the road." She's like, "Stop doing that." But they have uses, right? So, you can stack them. And then as the water lily, and the cool thing, and I wish I had like a time lapse of it, within really overnight, you put the plant where the water lily's just barely maybe 3 to 4 inches from beneath the water surface, but not too much to where it's trying to pull out of the pot. And with overnight, those water lilies would be flat on the water again. And some shaking your head, you've seen that. It's probably one of the coolest things. Because we look at our plants, we're like, oh man, it's grown so much in the last couple of weeks. This is overnight. And you can see that. And then as and I normally say wait up to a week after those leaves are solid again. And by now the roots are also burying down. Then go ahead and lower it, another 6 inches or so until you get it into the depth of the pond. If you have enough room, or if you don't have a lot of room in your pond to do that, or maybe you don't want to go and buy cylinder blocks or whatever, you can also do that in like one of the 10-gallon or $10 trash cans at Walmart. They're like 30 gallons, and that'll give you about a 3 foot deep pond, and you just fill it up a little bit more water every day or every other day. So that's a great use for or a great way to do that. Then also sitting on the bottom in zone 4 is going to be our submerged plants. Oxygenators is another word for them. And those would be in the bottom, and they don't care typically as long as they're, I'm going to say within 4 feet. Most people's ponds are not over 4 feet. If they are, again, start them off in the shallower areas and then let them down. We've actually seen things like jungle veil and red luiga in the springs up in New Braunfels doing turtle surveys. And we've been in like 5 foot, 6 foot deep water, and literally the plant itself is like 3 feet. So they'll come up and stretch up. As long as they can see the sun, they're okay. And last but not least, the most controversial of all of the plants are the floating plants. If you want to go by how many plants are most criticized and most not legal to have if the DNR stops by your house, water hyacinth, water lettuce, Those are probably your biggest ones. I mean, and really like plants that are banned in states, almost always some type of floating plant. There's some, we'll see some slides in a minute, but some of them I didn't put on there just because they're illegal in Texas and many states, actually almost all of them. That's a good question. So why can I buy them? Why can I buy them all day long from nurseries in Florida that won't send them to me in Texas? Most of the time, it's because things like water hyacinth, which if you head any of the ponds around here during the summertime, a lot of them will be full to the as far as you can see, water hyacinth. The negatives are they choke up the waterways, so boats have a trouble going through them. Another reason is that if they cover the entire water surface, that can be bad for fish. And again, it's like, okay, did you sit there and study the fish? But a lot of it's just they get a bad rap. The only thing that is really true that if it got into a natural waterway with submerged plants, remember how I mentioned they got to be able to see the sun? Well, this is going to shade all those native submerged plants out. And then those have a benefit like creating more oxygen and things like that for the fish and having places to hide. They have a lot of benefits. One is nutrient export, including heavy metal toxins. So actually, ironically enough, in the state capital of a state where it's illegal to have them, Austin, they actually use water hyacinth in greenhouses next to the Colorado River as part of the final stage in wastewater treatment. Because it's
greenhouse and they're not going to get out.
Yes, and they can spread by seed, but that's actually very, very, very difficult. So I always, again, we sell them. I should have asked if anybody's DNR in here. I always just caution people, hey, if you want to, like right now, they don't come to your house and issue tickets, right? But if I'm talking to a room of 20, 30 people right here, and one of us goes and dumps it in a creek, or just doesn't take care of it, and maybe you live near a flood zone, I'd never recommend that plant if you live near a flood zone. Same thing with koi. A lot of people don't realize we're one person's legislation away from banning koi like they do in Australia and already I think it's Maine, where literally, if the DNR comes to your house, they will take and kill all your koi because they are illegal and they're invasive. Every time we share a picture of somebody catching a giant koi that's the same exact picture of the giant koi that's been spread around the internet for 10 years, stop doing that. Because what happens is it drains fear, right? So it's the same thing, to an extent. That's what happened with water hyacinth and water lettuce. They can be a problem, but always.
That's the first time I've ever heard that koi could be outlawed.
Yes.
They're just carp.
They are.
They've been in rivers forever.
That's true.
Why the change?
It's not a political conversation, but if sense was what legislated our government, I think it would be different. Right? And you would think their bright orange predators will be the first ones to get them. They're actually really good at hiding from herons unless it's in our ponds. So they're pretty good. And when they do breed, they breed a lot of fish. And if they have those natural, perfect environments that little bass and brim love, yeah, exactly. So they can take over.
Do you have any submerged zone 4 plants besides lilies that are native?
As far as oxygenator type plants?
Well, in zone 4, the submerged plants, I know the lilies are, but the other, do you have any of those that are native?
There are. Right off the top of my head, yes, yeah, we're going to get to that. We're going to have a slide for each one of these. So yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, there are a few native ones, and it's bad business for me to tell you to go to ditches and pick out water plants or creeks. I always just caution people, you can get water hyacinth for free, especially down in the valley. I actually got some Mexicana water lilies out of there as well. Please note, the person I got permission from it was spraying weed killer all over everything. So I did not put those in my ponds that I care about. Also, my wife said, well, now you're going to have leukemia because of the Roundup. And I said, that could be true. That guy was out there spraying it into the wind and breathing it. So, I always caution people, we don't use any type of fertilizers, at least like what you would think of like, we don't use any like Roundup or anything like that. I'm very cautious about putting things into the pond. So and in that situation, I kept them in a separate pond. When they started shooting up new leaves, I cut off the old leaves just in case, and then sold them. So they were in quarantine essentially for about 2 months before I sold them. So again, I would be a hypocrite if I told you not to get plants out of the creeks and streams, as long as it's legal to do so or you have the landowner's permission. This is Texas. Trespassing is you can get shot for that. So I have yet to be asked by a police officer what I'm doing on the side of the road with garbage bags. My wife always asks, "What are you going to do if they pull up?" And say, "I'm cleaning up the side of the road." I don't know. I don't know. Everything I looked up said it's fine as long as it's not someone's property that you don't have permission on. So, but be careful because there's getting shot. Snakes. I haven't been shot at yet, but snakes are a real concern. Also, wild pigs. They like to eat water lilies that are on the side of the road, and they like to poop in the same water. So, fun fact: most of the recalls that we have for like E. coli and salmonella and things like that for lettuce actually come from the wild hogs polluting the natural water sources, and then it gets sprayed on top of the plants. And then they cut them, and then, depending on how well they're washed, E. coli is E. coli, right? So that's a concern. So again, certainly free is better than paying for them unless you realize the other costs that might be there. Then there's us and other places that sell pig poop free plants. So they're not turtle poop free though, so just be cautious with that. Don't lick the plants. I mean, you can eat them, but cook them first. So here's a couple of plants that you might want to put around your pond. So some of these you'll see can grow in the water, and again, it's going to be in that zone 1, kind of that real shallow area, less than 6 inches deep. But these are things you may have around your pond or around your house already, like creeping thyme, bacopa. These are stone plants. That's cut off my bottom of my thing here. All these things, ice plant is another one. They like to be near the water. They like that moisture, even though some of these are more like a succulent. They still like to have, that's how they get their water in the desert, is from the moisture in the air. So they like that. Creeping Jenny. A lot of these are called creeping because that's what they do. They spread out, so they look good. And what they'll do is they'll actually, you can plant these in and around like a waterfall or the edge of your pond, and the plant itself will waterfall with it and grow where it wants to. And it can be really pretty, and then again, it's doing its job. So awesome. Some of them flower. Passion flower. This is one I actually have, and I know a couple of people here that have it because we have it at the pond fish plant swap every year. But passion flower does like a lot of moisture, so growing it in and around your pond, I'm going to try that this year with one of the ones I have. So also some of your plants that don't like to go directly in the water, but of course look really good, are going to be things like plumeria. And desert flowers, things like that, also go with the pond. Don't put them in the pond; that they don't like to be wet. But hibiscus is another. Not only does it look tropical and beautiful by your pond, but there's many species of hibiscus, including the Texas star hibiscus, that like to be wet. And I grow that in my bog, just putting a stick of it in there, and it goes crazy. So, all right. So what about if you don't have a pond, or if you've tried the things we're going to talk about at the end for koik pest eating on your plants? You can do waterproof containers, both we call them patio ponds if you don't have a pond already, or you can actually do patio ponds in your pond, and those act as like little miniature ponds where you can put things, grow plants and things like that out of the water, but still fully submerged. So something like this is actually one that Aquascape sell. I think it's $700. But if you're like, I've seen one like that at the Home Depot or one like that at Home Goods, and it's probably cheaper. Okay, go buy it. I found some pots last year at the end of closeout at Walmart. They're normally like $30 and they were on sale for $6. So I was the crazy guy buying, I'm sure some of y'all been there, buying 10, going to 5 different Walmarts to find all of them. But those make good lotus ponds. Here's showing how you got water lettuce, water lily. It looks like some either sedge or cattails in there. So you can, you've got all of those zones we just talked about, probably some oxygenating plants in there as well. All those zones talked about. Now one that's creeping in beside that actually in the hanging basket there, or the basket that's up kind of to the left, that actually looks like that could be impatiens. And those also make really good bog plants. And they are typically not very expensive. And those do, they're very, flowers of all different colors. And they do a good job. They love being in the water.
How big is that?
It's about, if I remember off the top of my head, the top that you're looking at is a little bit under 3 feet by 3 feet. So it's a pretty large planter. I think it's made out of fiberglass. And what doesn't show up good here in the picture is it's got like a slate imprint that they use. They have like some stacked slate urns and things like that. So yeah, they make really, really good quality products. But just like any good quality product, they command the price as well. So that's just, again, it can be a 5-gallon bucket that you got for free that you're putting plants in.
How do you avoid something like that standing water?
So with something like this, that actually, the little bamboo thing is actually a fountain. It's just not on in that picture. You can also, we get them, we have them in stock right now, but there's solar fountains that do real well. I'll say that with our water, they tend to get the white deposits on them from the hard water, which you can kind of wipe off with vinegar, take a little scrubbing pad and knock them off. But those tend to work pretty good, and you get them, we sell them for $15, and that's about what they are on eBay. That's a great way. You can do something as simple as a bubbler, like an aquarium bubbler, just enough to move the water a little bit. With oxygenating plants in there, you'd be surprised, unless it's in direct sunlight getting really, really hot, which zaps the oxygen out. You could, standing water would probably be more of a concern for mosquitoes. And then again, some of those killifish, betas if you're old school like me and remember when they called them betas, even though everybody, it's the correct pronunciation is beta, but I grew up with them being called betas. Those do really good in these containers. Now you would have to bring that fish inside for the winter time, but again, nice little 1-gallon fish bowl with a plant in it, and that beta is going to be pretty happy for the year. Or for the winter time. Guppies, something that we're getting into right now, and I bought them at the last meeting that we had, are rice fish. Those can be very pretty from the top down, but they also do well over winters. So, frozen solid in Minnesota, or 2 inches of pond ice across it, and they still are living underneath it. So.
If you bought it at the last meeting, does that mean Water Garden Joyce has them?
It does, yeah. They get them in, and I actually talked to the person that orders the fish. They're supposed to be ordering some more pretty ones for ponds, some of the orange ones. A big trend now is to call anything with different color patterns, looks like a koi swordtail, or a koi rice fish, or a koi guppy. We actually have koi, or red and white koi swordtails right now. So it's just, it depends what you want and whether or not you're going to chance it over winter. Some of the tropical fish do better than others over the winter, with just, a heater or something like that. Yep. Most of the community fish will go to it. If you have aggressive fish like cichlids, they'll end up killing each other by knocking each other into the cold water, which is what happened in my pond this year, so that wasn't fun. So here's some oxygenators, just kind of real quick on these. What do we have here locally that I have personally seen? Hornwort, veil or turtle grass, Anchreus, LED is pretty common, red luiga, and kabamba. This one, both these I've seen over 3, maybe even 4 feet long. Moneywort's another one. Some of these plants, like moneywort, will actually grow, and red luiga will actually grow to the water surface, and given enough time and condition, they can actually come out of the water and you'll get a completely different looking plant. So that's something cool. If you see an aquarium plant, which is what most of these are, they can actually go up above the water. Some of them can, and they change into a completely different plant. Some of them flower and things like that. So, and lemon bacopa gets, it's almost like mint when you squeeze it, but it smells like lemons. You can also eat that too. So,
What is that called?
lemon bacopa.
Lemon ricotta?
It's on the other side. Bacopa, yeah. It's like BAC. Yes.
Would there be a particular plant like that you could put along the very bottom of the pond and almost make it look like a lawn?
Yes. Yes. Now, again, we're going to get into the how deep is your pond and how cold does the water get down on the very bottom. But one of the things that, again, most of these are going to do better if the water doesn't get below 40s. But the jungle veil grows really quickly. And they call it turtle grass because it looks a lot like the sea turtle, the grass, marine grass that grows like in the Laguna Madre. So that's a good one. Again, it just depends on the individual plant, how cold they like to get, on what you can put down at the bottom. But there's a few like hornwort does pretty well. So if it's native to America, it's what state is it native in would tell us, can you plant it in your pond and will it come back? So, but.
Those are all shown in gravel.
Those are, yeah.
Now, does it matter if you use clay, topsoil, or gravel?
Typically not. The only time I would plant a plant in gravel would be if it was to simulate a bog. And so that's actually, if you don't want to build it, first of all, I don't like filling my bogs with gravel. That's a whole nother conversation. But if you wanted to have plants, a good way of anchoring them is in gravel. And since you're not giving them any nutrients via soil, they're going to want to uptake that nutrients from the water. And that goes for, the only thing I would not do that with is water lilies, because you're going to want to put the fertilizer in there. And if you put fertilizer in the rocks, it's going to dissipate and go out in the pond and then create a problem with the algae. So the water lilies are a little bit slower to feed. So you would want to plant those in. And typically we use kitty litter, plain clay cat litter, no additives, special kitty like at Walmart, got some hands up. That's old school aquascapes from like 35 years ago with the first VHS that I got from a landscaper in my church. He's like, hey, you like ponds? They sent me this and we don't do ponds. I was like, that's cool, it's a VHS. And that's the first time I figured out what aquascapes was. But yeah, these are from a website where they sell aquarium plants, and a lot of these are aquarium plants as well. But again, we have these naturally in the springs around here. So they are naturally grown in ponds and streams.
Do the fish eat them?
They can.
I mean, if you find them and you stick them in and they're eating them, it's just depressing.
Yeah, I know. It's a plant. I mean, it's a plant. It's not gonna. Most fish and animals are the same way. I don't know. Dogs and cats might be the exception. Maybe horses. Most things, an animal will only eat once if it makes them sick. So it's the same thing. We run into that with taro all the time on the turtle side. Oh, that's bad for your turtles. They can't eat that. I can take you to New Braunfels and get in the river there, and you can see that all of the taro growing along the bank of the river have little diamond spots cut out where all those turtles have been eating on it. And if one falls in mine from the bog, the next day it's just the potato floating. So they do that for you, and my turtles are fine. So.
Just a word on the kitty litter, make sure it's plain.
Yes.
Walmart, a special kitty litter red bag.
Yep.
The other stuff has soda and.
Yeah, you don't want any additives. Certainly no smell. It's also sold, and again, you be careful because people get creative. They're trying to sell theirs versus another company's. Oil absorber, the very, very cheap stuff is typically just clay cat litter. It's not, the technical term for it's not cat litter, but that all works great. You can use soil. I have a lot of people say, well, I've got dirt, from digging out the pond. That's what Water Garden Gyms does. The only problem with that is, in at least the top foot or so of the soil, you don't know what was in that. Certainly it's going to have nutrients in it naturally. It may have fertilizers in it. It may have some type of grass fertilizers or weed killers that were put in it. And that doesn't mean that's gonna kill your fish or nuke everything in your pond, but not knowing what you put in your pond, if you're trying to chase down a problem later, it's gonna be a problem. So these are just some of the bog plants that exist. Many of them. I'll point out some of my favorites. Red thalia is great. I love these red stems on here. The other most common question I get is, will it survive in my pond over the winter? And for most of these, the answer is probably. So everybody knows that it got cold this year. I fought the wind and the wind won. So there were many of my ponds, including my bog pond, that did not get covered. Or parts of it that didn't get covered. My umbrella palm, red thalia, which thalia is a tropical plant. So if it got much colder than that, or it wasn't in the water, if it were to freeze solid, it's probably not coming back. Certain taros, yes. The black magic, I'm still waiting for that one to come back. But green taro, typically, it's kind of infamous. You can't kill it. The bananas come back. That's a banana tree. This guy's like 6 feet tall, and he's standing by, bless you, he's standing by his pond where in the bog he has banana trees growing. He's actually in Newton, North Carolina, and the blog that I found of his is from 2005. So he was actually growing bananas. They got so far as in one summer to actually have bananas on the tree or the plant. They did not, however, they got their first freeze and they went ahead and took them off and they weren't ready. But
We used to live in San Antonio. We now live in England, but when we were in San Antonio, we had bananas and they produced fruit. And
yes,
just leave lots of water.
yep. Yeah, and yeah, it's typically 6 months of not getting frozen, but what we run into here in San Antonio is even when it's, and this happened this year, I chopped a lot of mine pretty much all the way down the ground, but if you ever cut down a banana tree, literally the next day you'll see that like something on the inside's popped up. That's the corm. They grow from the inside out. So when we say 16 months of frozen free or frost free, that's if the little baby banana plant, the flower, is inside there and doesn't get frozen. So even cutting them down, it's 16 months typically of growth that they need. And even though they get frozen, sometimes they're actually not frozen all the way inside. So yeah, in San Antonio it is possible. We're hoping for that this year because I have 4 racks of bananas and lost them all during the freeze. So
As far as bog plants, you have to be careful, right?
what was that?
That the bog plants don't become so invasive.
Yes.
Especially in gravel that you just.
Yeah.
Right? Is that why you don't like gravel?
That, and I don't like work. So what I have is what I call a rock-free bog, also known as a settlement chamber, but with plants. So it's kind of a hybrid of what people with koi would have, and then the bog that like Aquascapes preaches that people put in their pond. If you're doing a bog and you do it right, it's pretty maintenance-free, but you need things like what they call the centipede. There's versions of it. I haven't. My bogs typically are about 1 foot to 1.5 foot deep. They're just not deep enough to do that, but they're also above ground. So I have a drain plug and I just undo the drain and all the junk that's piled up in there, all the sediment goes right out into the lawn.
What do you fill them with if not gravel?
Nothing, water,
Dirt?
water. Yeah, so, and then the plants, again, if you want them to anchor like day one, you can plant them in gravel and you're doing the same thing, but just in like a net pot. Yeah, use like the net pots on there or the milk crates.
Right? Because what you're going to put in there, you may just have a hell of a time getting it out.
And worst case scenario, I have a battery powered hedge trimmer across the whole top of the taro.
It's just completely penetrating all that gravel.
Yeah.
It can be a problem.
Well, and that's why I don't like the gravel. So if you have, like, let's say you have a clump of, pick one that grows like that, umbrella palm. Umbrella palm loves to grow crazy. I could take that whole, and I say milk crate, but I'm talking about the produce crates, because they're almost perfect for that because the gravel will stay in them. I can take that whole thing out, and I can just take that container out. And because it's nothing but water in there with it, when I take that out, anything hanging off the side is going to be easy to remove. And I don't want to lift up like 100 pounds of gravel, so I'm just going to have like a small container. Like I said, the freeze hit and it knocked out like the tops of all the taro and the umbrella palm. That's all coming back now. So yeah, I don't like I know we use the word all the time, invasive. That means the plant's doing its job. So it's actually a good thing, right? If our tomatoes and our lettuce and our banana trees were invasive, we'd love it. You know, like, oh my gosh, I can't eat. I've got like 5 pounds of bananas right now in the freezer from last year I haven't eaten it. You know, mint's the same way. Mint will get in your grass and take over, but it smells a lot better than grass. So there's people that actually rip up their grass, or instead of doing sod, and they'll plant purple thyme. Because it actually will choke out the grass, and then you never mow. But you've got this beautiful lawn, and it's heat resistant, drought resistant, cold resistant. You know, it'll die in like a freeze, but it comes back. So, you know, invasive, when we're talking about like water hyacinth, again, they're invasive because they do their job, and they're not native to here. Yeah. Purple thyme, like that we eat. Yeah, and it's edible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of these bog plants are edible. Another one, probably my very favorite bog plant or tall bog plant, is going to be giant papyrus. This did freeze out this year, so it all turned brown and has to be cut down with a hedge trimmer. But as of, what was that, a month ago that we got that freeze? Was it a month ago? 2 months ago? It grows 8 to 10 feet tall. There are dwarf versions of it. We actually have the giant version. It's hard to find the giant because it doesn't ship well. Or it's very expensive. But right now I have them that are already about that tall. So from frozen solid to that big in about a month or two. Was that? So those will actually grow out of the water in dirt. So will umbrella palm. So yeah, and they will grow in deeper. Yeah, if I were to take umbrella palm or papyrus and drop it in 3 feet of water, it would go soft and wouldn't like it. Like it would die off. It may come back up from that depth. So yours comes up from that depth. And it's probably because it's used to that. Yeah. So yeah, they can grow. Yeah, they can grow. Like in this case, this looks more like a natural pond. And that is 8 to 10 feet papyrus right there. And it grows wild along the banks of the Nile River. That's Egyptian papyrus. You know, it's what Moses' raft was made out of, that the princess put him in. It's what paper comes from, the word papyrus. So they literally used to the Egyptians made paper out of it. But as you see there, it started off in the shallow, and it's growing deeper. So it will grow deeper. So, and I always say, you know, there's exceptions to everything, and, you know, pond plants certainly are excluded. This is another one here. Now there are more tropical versions and more hardy versions of canna, but canna is one of those very common garden plants. But again, it'll take over your garden if you let it.
I have a canna that looks amazing, and every year it's getting bigger.
Yes.
More space.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
Yep. So I have a neighbor, she loves canna, and bananas, so I'll take her some of my plants. And she's like, well, I got this one, and this one. And she's always dividing them because she has them in a planter, you know. And she's like, I got to keep watering these. I was like, you need a pond if you love these plants, because they will come back. I've got one called Picasso, which has a pretty, you know, it's pretty much green leaf, but the actual flowers on it are orange with red dots, or yellow with dark orange dots. It's really, really pretty. So again, the taros, Black Magic is one that we normally carry. People love that one. That one I think is tropical. I don't think it's going to come back. We'll see. And there's also, I mean, there's probably 24 varieties of different types of actual true taros, all the way from purple to green. There's one called Hawaiian Punch, which the stems actually look like this, but with the green taro leaf on top. So that's actually a canna there. The leaves itself are variegated there, so pretty cool. All right. So let's talk about water lilies. Hardy, dwarf, changeables. So those are some of the terms you might hear. A hardy water lily is going to be, and when I first started the hobby back in late 90s, I would get a book from the internet that was sent to my mailbox, and it had just about a half page of hardy water lilies. At that time, we thought like 100 was a lot worldwide, different types of hardy lilies. Now, I can't tell you. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Every year, there's actually an annual water lily contest, put on by the International Water Garden Society. Many of the plants that we carry, like Juan Visa, are actually have won that. Best water lily, best hardy water lily, things like that of the year. Florida Aquatic Nurseries has something like, I think, 60 water lilies between tropical and hardy that they've won first, second, third, or best overall. So yeah, these are some of my favorites and things that, these are ones that we tend to carry in stock. James Bryden, that one actually has a almost like a Jolly Rancher, apple Jolly Rancher smell to it. It's very pretty. One I thought I put it on here. There's a white one called Tetragona. It's not the smallest water lily in the world. That one comes from Rwanda. And if you can find one on eBay, I got outbidded at $450. So, yeah. I was like, hey, I sold a lot of plants this month, and I still couldn't get one. But the next best one, and they're very hard to take care of, they actually required 90 to 95 degree water, and only about that much water above the top of the pot. So you actually have to build a special, which I was gonna do. You have to build a special, like, superheated patio pond for them. But the alternative to that, instead of spending over $500, I think that one ended at $650. Instead of spending $650 on a small white water lily, you can actually buy Tetragona, which we sell for $30. So the flowers are about that big. So. A lot of these are changeable. So these over here we would call changeable. So they actually change colors. And that's kind of where we're at now. I mentioned, a long time ago, it was like Alba was the white water lily. Comanche, you might get a Comanche in there every once in a while. The red one would probably been an attraction water lily. Those are pretty popular back then. Again, just dozens of different ones. Now what you're starting to see is some of the tropical qualities that people like in a hardy water lily. So like when we see the molded leaves here, those are actually like a pinkish red color, and they do change as the leaves get older. Juan Visa also has a really pretty leaf. Comanche as well. Here's another example of a changing one. So these actually start off a little bit more yellow, and then they change to a bronze color. Comanche does that, but ends up in almost a reddish pink color. And they change like every day when it opens. So those are some things, even if you just want hardy or water lilies that in all zones in America will come back year after year, that would be a hardy water lily. Some of the things that make it a hardy water lily, and we'll talk about some exceptions, are going to be that both the leaves and the flower are floating on the surface of the water when they're growing naturally. An exception to that would be if you take that water lily pot and give it virtually no water above the pot, it will try to send those leaves up into the air trying to get them in the water, but on a hot day they're gonna wilt and it won't work. But sometimes you will find some of the hardy water lilies that their water lily sticks just a little bit up above the water, but compared to a tropical water lily, they don't. So, tropicals, these are my favorite. These are why I have a greenhouse. Tropical typically means even here in Southern America, that they won't come back if they're exposed to true freezing, meaning like ice across the pond. Some of them are or actually more hardy than others, but they're still considered tropicals. We actually have one true native to America tropical, and that's called the Elegans hooker. That's named for the person who discovered it. His last name was Hooker. But those those are wild along the coastal Bend area. They actually also change from white to almost a purple color, or purple to a white. They descend in color. They smell like vanilla. They're very awesome. I'm trying to get some more of them, but I'm fighting the wild hogs and the drought. So I do carry them when we have them. So those are really cool. But that as far as Texas native, that's a Texas native tropical water lily, and it does survive freeze. It also puts out a lot of seeds. So, in that way, it would come back as well. The other one is going to be a semi-hardy water lily, and that's Mexicana, which I mentioned earlier they have down in Harlingen. That is a hardy water lily, but when you look at it, it does put its flower above the water, kind of like a tropical. Temperature-wise, it's hardy. And then also when you look at the actual tuber that it grows, it looks more like a tropical. There's a few different, and if you want to get into it, the water garden book that I have here goes through and tells you the different types of tubers. That's another way we can identify a plant even if it doesn't have a flower or a leaf. Especially now, again, there's about 5 different types of things to look for. So tropical, we have day blooming and night blooming. Does anybody here have like a job where you have to get up early in the morning or stay out late at night? No, maybe not. Day blooming, obviously, it's going to bloom during the day. Night blooming, we say night, but it's really like sunset is when it starts opening. It's fully open by like 10. I actually, on our Facebook page, Rudder's Tropicals, actually put a time lapse that I did of one of the night bloomers blooming. It's pretty cool. And then you typically get about, I'm gonna say till almost 10 o'clock in the morning. So, early rise or late risers can typically still see it on a day like today. As long as it's not actually actively raining, if it's just overcast like this, you may see it 12:30 in the afternoon, then finally it starts closing itself back up. So really cool, just a different type of water lily here. So what?
I guess going back to the hardies, it seems like some of them that I have these rhizomes that are just really super aggressive, and they're just.
That's a hardy water lily
You
trait.
get them in the pot, and just like after a year, they just stay solid.
Yeah.
In there. And then other ones aren't as.
And that's just
There's a distinction between.
different types of tubers. Yeah, so you have ones that grow more like a pineapple, and that's kind of like the Mexicana. It's a hardy water lily. And then you also have like Juan Visa comes to mind. It's growing, like you said, it looks like a tuber that it's almost like a ginger root. If you've ever seen that. And then it'll shoot out baby plants. And you kind of have a couple of choices of, depending on how big your tray or pot is. I always plant my hardy water lilies in a more shallow container because they're not going deep into it, but they're going around it and things like that. Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question? So on the tropical, these are all day bloomings. Albert Greenberg, one of my first tropical water lilies, still, for back in the early 2000s. This is still one of my favorites and the one that we keep in stock. Tropical water lilies are going to have their leaves on the water, flowers above the water. And I don't know of an exception to that as far as the flowers. Some of them are a little bit lower to the water, but if they're growing in the right conditions, their flowers are always going to be typically, let's say the plant has a 4-foot spread, its flowers are almost always going to be about 4 to 6 inches above the water at a minimum. Some of the bigger ones like the Foxfire, which is there we go, this one here. This is actually a really, really large tropical water lily. Some of these, and I kid you not, I have tried to take pictures and the pictures do not do them justice. Because the way the sun's reflecting off of something like the Southern Charm right here, that's not what color you see. This is actually like an iridescent color. With the cameras, like we cannot recreate it the way it looks in the wild. As far as like on a screen, you can't recreate it. That's just same thing with the Albert Greenberg. The way that they fade, Key West is similar. The way that the colors fade and across the petals there, the cameras just do not, and I've tried all kinds of different lighting and settings, and you can't get it to recreate what you're actually looking like in the wild. The other thing that makes a tropical water lily different, again, more cold sensitive. Many of them may not survive. Depending, like Larry's got a pretty large pond, pretty decent depth, but not super deep. A lot of tropical stuff might survive in his pond because it's larger, and on the 5 days of freezing temperatures we had, you might not have had ice across it, or at least not across the whole thing. There are tropicals that do survive under ice, as the last snowstorm we had, I had some survive. Albert Greenberg tends to be one that, I'll say it's pretty hardy, but again, not technically a hardy water lily, it's just pretty good at surviving cold. I also love Florida, so I try to keep in stock Key West, Miami Rose, and a new one that they just won some awards for is Key Largo. It's more of a lavender color, so we're hopefully going to get some of those in this year. So those are some cool ones. Tropical, if you're looking for a color and it's not available in a hardy, tropicals are the way to go. Every color you can think of, from pinks, blues, yellows, whites, reds, all over the spectrum. Just from the wholesaler that I use, there's about 80 to 100 different tropical water lilies that they sell. When you start talking about people in Thailand and other places that are hybridizing them and making their own, there's several hundred a year that are added.
How deep do you recommend we put the?
Water lilies? Tropicals like to be just as deep as Hardy's, so 4 foot max. If you have a really big pond and you've had the water lily a while, you can go a little bit deeper than that. But they typically like to be, again, we grow them in as shallow as like 20 inches of water, and you could do that as well. But the deeper they are, the bigger the spread's going to be on them. So.
The balloons on all these, they only last, what, 5 days?
Yeah, typically some of them are 3 days. Your tropicals, that's going to be another thing that separates those from your Hardies. First of all, tropicals love fertilizer, so you might only fertilize a Hardy water lily once every few months. Here I think we have a pretty long growing season from really March, like mine are now, I could maybe April to December, January, as long as it hasn't frozen yet.
What do you do what's the best thing to do once the bloom goes dead and it's shriveled and it's just rotting on the water?
So you have a couple of choices. One is to just let it decay in the pond if your pond can support that. Some people, will go out weekly and trim them. And when I say trimming, just a little bit of a fingernail and you can pop them right off. A lot of times that's therapeutic. That's one reason why I love my ponds above the ground, because people can actually go and take them out.
Can you snip them like close to the
Water lilies, yes. Water lilies, yes. Lotus, no. Lotus have actually like little straw tubers or stems, and if water gets down in that, they can actually rot that part of the tuber. So that's a way you can if you damage one, especially when you're planting it. There's some things you can try, like putting wax over them and things like that, or a little bit of like silicone even. Like you want to prevent the water from going down in there. If they naturally die, though, you'll see the lotus kind of turn brown and it kind of shrivels that. That's it naturally closing that, knowing that water could get down in there. So your third option with tropical water lilies is if they have flowered and have successfully turned to seed pods. Of course, you could save the seed pod to grow water lilies later, or let it settle and you'll find little baby water lilies all in your pond in a few months. But you can also, back to the edible slide, you can actually take the seed pod itself. When you bust it open, it has tiny little things that look like poppy seeds in it. And it is an Asian delicacy to take those. Some people call them lotus, and people do it with lotuses as well. But they actually make little bit popcorn. And then they take honey and they mix that with the seeds, with the popped water lily seeds, and it's a treat. So there's actually a cool YouTube video of somebody doing that as well. All right, night blooming. Again, we talked about the time of day. Here's some different varieties there. Red Cup is actually a variety made from red flare that they actually made because red flare is not a hardy overwinter water lily at all. It's probably one of the least hardy of all my water lilies I've had. But it is very pretty. So at night, if you take a picture of it, it actually glows pink. That's why they call it red flare. It actually has its petals all the way out. Its child, the red cup, doesn't get as flashy, but this one will survive ice on the pond. From February 2021, it survived with not only ice, but 5 inches of snow on top of it.
Does it have the same bronze leaves?
They're gonna be a little greener. So that's one thing you'd get with the red flare. These are just gonna be slightly greener than those. And because it's its parent, sometimes you'll get a little bit of a bronze on there, but it is more hardy. And, so those are a couple ones. Jennifer Rebecca, that's one that we got new last year. Woods White Knight, another one that we got last year that's really nice. Larry, I think, has the Jennifer Rebeccas. Yeah, so they're really pretty.
Are they pretty hardy?
Did they come back yet? Oh, then yeah. I'm gonna say they're 3 days of freezing temperatures hardy, and you live in the hill country, so it probably was even colder there. Something like the Red Cup, from my experience, it actually survived the 10 days of not getting above freezing that we had in 2021, solid ice. So.
About 4 years ago, when it big snow and ice, everything was like frozen.
Yeah.
And some of the tropicals came back.
Yeah. The other thing that will affect any water lily, but especially tropicals when it's cold, is they slow down. So if you do have fish in there, they like to eat the plants. And so if they find, the little baby water lilies coming up, they'll eat on those. It's a delicacy for them. So sometimes it might actually would come back if you pull it to the side. When it starts, looking like it's over for the season, you can store them in peat moss. It's a good way to store them.
One thing too on the tropicals is that I found is that I had some that weren't doing that well last year.
Uh-huh.
And, I thought they were gonna die. And I just fertilized them and boy, next thing you know, they went boom. And huge leaves and flowers and everything. So they're very, they like fertilizer.
Yes, they do like fertilizer. And if you can keep them growing, we'll, a little bit of skipping ahead here, but if you have a fully mature water lily and you give your koi something else to do, that water lily has a much better chance of surviving. So one tip that I can give you is to put, if you don't already have rocks that the koi can pick up and chew on or nuzzle through, put a couple extra pots in there. And then on your water lily, instead of putting nice, I don't like the tiny gravel because that can get out pretty quickly, but put actually pieces of slate across the top of the dirt on the water lily, because that has a sharp edge to it. Now it's not razor sharp, but it's enough to irritate the fish. So think about it, if you've got your lips trying to munch on something and it's kind of sharp, you're gonna go to the next pot that has the nice algae covered smooth rocks, right? So just give them something to do. I've got a little video here on that too. ISG, these are inter-sub-generic water lilies. They are tropical and hardy crossed. So if you did want a truly hardy water lily that looks like a tropical, here's 4 examples of that. These 3 are pretty reasonable. Detective Erica is brand new, and within the last few years, it, if I'm not mistaken, actually did win Best in Show at the International Water Garden Show when it came out. When it came out, they were about $300. Recently, they've gone cheaper. We sell them for $85. But they are still one of the most expensive, I'm gonna call them like more common, readily available water lilies, but they will survive zone 4 freezing and come back. So, but they do, but like a tropical, when they're growing, they like to be fertilized. So the tropicals also put out more flowers per plot. So I have a question. We're gonna talk about, the question is, what was your first and all except favorite pond plant? So just throw out some answers. Water lettuce. It's okay. Is anybody here a law enforcement officer? Water hyacinth you can also boil and eat too. Mexican petunia. I love that. People hate it because it's invasive, but it's doing its job.
On a rock, right, near the waterfall.
Yep. Yep. And that, it's funny because that one actually, we could grow it in a pond, but it's actually a drought tolerant plant according to the San Antonio Sols, right? So it literally can go either way. Yep. Yeah, you can get miniature, purple, white, pink, and there's the flowers on them, and the stalk's really nice. What else?
Horsetail.
Horsetail, that's a good one. Yeah. A couple of different varieties. Typically, it's going to be one of the what I call like your waist-high bog plants. You got like the curly Q version of it. The corkscrew rush looks like that. So kind of looks like asparagus. That can also, by the way, be grown out of the water and plant and just in a flower bed. Yeah. Well, no, the horsetail rush. So
Obedient plant, which is
not obedient. That one's good. Any other ones? Yellow iris, those are good. And again, some people would consider those invasive, but iris, canna, another one of those plants that many people are familiar with as a landscape plant, never knew that it also loves to be in the water. So, yeah, awesome. Pickerel rush, yeah, that's one of my favorites as well. Again, that's not only edible, but also 3 different color varieties, white, blue, and pink. So, yeah. Awesome. And right now, the other cool thing is, traditional plants like sweet flag, cattail, water celery, society garlic. Society garlic is another one of those land plants that loves the water. All of those are available also in variegated form. So you might, that might be, if you think, oh, I love the iris, or I love the sweet flag look. Well, the variegated version is just another aspect to a plant that you might also enjoy. So for me, way back in, I'm gonna say 1996, I think it was, my mom let me build my first pond. It was a $9.99 kiddie pool from Walmart. I was like, that looks silly, so I put a piece of black plastic across it. So I conned some of my friends from church to come over after church and play, and we built my first pond. But soon after that, I realized it's not just a hole in the ground that I put my little turtle in. I need some plants. So one of the very first plants I got was Aztec arrowhead. So this is a really cool plant. There are different versions of it. This one is a little more tropical. However, during the freeze, it did freeze out, but a piece of plastic from where I had covered the other pond was barely laying across one of them. And that one already came back. So it's kind of one of those, right on the edge. If it had gotten stayed a little bit warmer, they wouldn't have bit the dust. It's part of the water plantain family. There are many different varieties of Sagittaria. One thing about me, I'm really bad at pronouncing the names, but I can tell you what the common name is and I can show it to you. Every variety of that plant is edible. So pretty cool, but I love it because it's the only one of the Sagittarias that actually has these really pretty burgundy spots on the flowers. Again, even if you treat it as a tropical and it doesn't come back for you every year, it's a beautiful plant. Do I have any Hunger Game fans in the house?
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember where it is.
Yeah, we're going to find out. So I had to put 2 and 2 together because it has another common name, and I just thought, somebody's named Iris, right? Like, that's a plant, right? Doesn't mean they're named after Iris. So Hunger Games, Katniss. That is another name for the duck potato. Again, different varieties of it. It has been a main staple for a lot of indigenous people in America, and actually, where it's found around the world. Duck potato is another name for it. Katniss is what it is called. And recently, in the most recent movie, what do they call it? The movie before the movie? Prequel, there we go. The prequel to the Hunger Games films, we meet and they're calling it Katniss, right? Duck potatoes. They're actually harvesting it because that is really the only source of starch that they have available to them in the movie. So it's pretty cool that got a shout out. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And Katniss, as it's known by many names, including Sagittaria, arrowhead, duck potato, swan potato, tule potato, and wapato, which I believe is what the indigenous people call it.
Do they need to be in the sun?
Mine are kind of growing in I'd say partial shade, because they do get a little bit of shade, but I also grow it in my bog, which is pretty full sun.
No, I need some shade type stuff.
Okay, yeah, so I always say it just depends on the plant, really. I mean, the individual plant. So, because mine, I have where I buy them and they're small and then I put them to sell. And then I also have my display plants that are in my pond. Because they're small when I get them in, where I put them is under a Oklahoma redbud tree. So it's pretty shaded. So maybe, yeah. So I just thought that was cool, whether or not you know what Hunger Games are, I've seen the movies. It's Katniss, that's the main character there with the arrows. So, and then also I thought I'd put it on here. The Sagittaria, if you're into zodiac signs, Sagittaria comes from Sagittarius, which is, right? So it's named for the arrow part of Sagittarius. There's also something called Aussie hybrids. So Australian water lilies are huge and infamous for not being easy to take care of. Betty Lou is actually one that was crossed with another early tropical water lily, the colorata. And it actually has somewhat easier for it to grow. I'm going to try to get some of that this year. I know it's available, but I haven't had it yet. So it's another large size water lily. And it has this really, again, I'd really like to see in person, but again, just looking there, the almost the heathered look that it has is pretty cool. So, and last but not least, as far as water lilies go, is the Victoria cruziana. So we mentioned the world's smallest water lilies. This is one of the world's largest water lilies. Now, Victoria amazonica is actually the largest, and the water lily pads can get as big as this table here. So this girl here actually was growing, this is Cruziana, which again is the smaller version of it. That's kind of a reference there. That's the flower. Now, they are a night bloomer. Dwayne has some experience with those. So they do need a large pond. It's almost one of those, I would call it a pond built for a water lily instead of a pond that you just have to have some water lilies in. You can grow them in as small as like an 8-foot by 8-foot pond. Put it right in the middle. You have to constantly feed it fertilizer, but when you do, it rewards you with a cabbage-sized flower. So yeah, they're pretty awesome. So if you may have seen some of the older pictures, especially from the Victorian age, of people standing on a water lily, like getting married and things like that. Now there's some photo magic. They have like a little thing under it to help it. You can't stand on it, but I've seen 70, 80-pound kids get on top of it and lay on it. So it's pretty sturdy. Yes, so it will poke you and it doesn't feel good. And it will actually go through like leather gloves too. So there, I think Dwayne came up with didn't you come up with like a fertilizer pole to feed? Yeah, so, it actually, you want to do that. Once it's there, if you have to move it, you're gonna get stuck, so.
You mentioned about fertilizer, the AgriFarm tablets, we do, one a month for our lilies. When I was at Water Garden Gems, I had 2 Victorias, and I was feeding those things 4 tablets a week.
So they're hungry. They are really hungry. Now, this is a fully tropical plant. I like the Cruzianas. They're actually grown in Argentina. That's where they're naturally from. So they will take a little bit colder water. And they grow a little bit longer, I would say, here in our seasons. I would still completely treat that as an annual. There is some papers that I've seen that someone had them in Missouri in a natural pond, and they actually kept coming back and year over year. And that's, again, it's not supposed to happen. Florida Aquatic Nurseries, where I get my plants from, there's actually a video where Greg Wickstock, the pond guy from Aquascapes, went down there to tour their facilities, and the guy that raises the plants, they had just had a really cold year that year. That pond actually got ice across it, and they were selling the Cruzianas out of it that year because they were still alive and doing fine. So again, there's exceptions to everything. I'm going to try some of theirs this year. Most of them are imported from Asia, so they are typically really tropical. So I would love to get a hold of that strain, that variety of that particular plant, like that genetics that they had, because I know it has survived at least a little bit of ice across it. So lotus. Now, water lilies often get called lotuses. Also, if you watch the alligator hunting TV show, they call water hyacinth lilies, which irritates the snot out of me because I'm like, it's not water lilies, it's water hyacinth. So lotus, we talked about hardies, leaves on the ground, flowers on the ground, or on the water, right? Tropical, leaves on the water, flowers above the water. Lotus, leaves above the water, flowers above the water. You're also going to get a seed pod, which you're talking about earlier, the flower on a water lily, even a tropical, once it flowers, it goes away, right? It goes under the water. These, and you probably see these in arrangements, those are actually the seed pods, they stay up. Fun fact, someone has germinated one seed pod that was over 200 years old. So when you're at the flower arrangement, you're like, oh, that's a pretty flower arrangement. You see one of those lotus pods, you may just be able to generate a viable plant from that. So yeah, they grow in the water. You can treat them as a bog. You can treat them as a patio plant, even again inside your pond. But they'll also grow, just like a water lily, 3 feet deep. So, all right. Floating plants, we kind of talked a little bit about these already. The 2 most infamous ones are the water hyacinth and the water lettuce. Again, they are not legal to have here or possess, but I would be a hypocrite, and probably many people in the room. If you go on a pond tour, even in Austin, state capital, Almost everybody has them in their pond. The only thing I want to say about that is, again, keep it in your pond. Do not have it if you live somewhere that could potentially flood. And if you need to, you will need to dispose of it. I'll let it dry out on my compost pile or in the yard and mow over it. It makes excellent fertilizer for your plants. But just be careful with it, because you're not supposed to have it. And then if we're not supposed to have it and it starts down the street from you, the pond all of a sudden gets filled up with it, they're going to come looking, and you may be responsible for the cleanup of that plant. So.
On the pond tours, if you're on the tour, they send an email to everyone that says, if you're on the tour, if you have any illegal plants, get them out of the pond into the garage.
So that's a legal disclaimer. So we will not be having a pond tour at my house. I was like, no, look in there. Duckweed, this is another one that, although not illegal to possess, aquarium owners especially hate it. It does its job too. It covers the surface. Koi love to eat it. Tilapia love to eat it. So that's a true floating plant. Frogbit, there's two versions of this. There's a native North American version that is cold hardy. Actually gets little flowers on it. There's also an Amazon or Amazonica version of it that is a tropical, but in our ponds in the summer does really well. It's actually I prefer that one. Azolia, this is a cool plant it's super, super small. It's also called fairy plant, or what's the other one? The Azolia. Fairy moss or something else. I can't think of the name of it right quick. But that, again, it's a floating plant. That one will actually change color depending on the temperature. And it's interesting. You can have this in the wintertime, and then that'll go away once it gets really hot on the water surface, and duckweed will pop up. So they're kind of like, in some of my ponds, it goes back and forth, and it'll just completely disappear, and one will take over. Red root floater. This is one of those that people do like, especially in the aquarium pond side, or planted aquarium side. If you can get that to take off in your pond, put it on eBay, because you can get about $10 plus shipping for a little portion of it. And at all the aquarium stores, they'll buy it from you too, because people love it. And inside, it doesn't do really well, so people are constantly buying it. This is actually one of my favorite floating plants. Ludwiga, also known as mosaic plant. That's the one I can pronounce. It looks like this up close. You do plant it in a small pot in one of those like 6-inch shallow areas. But then, and actually we've got it 20 inches deep, but then what it does is like each one of these little mosaics starts growing, and you get like these color variations, and it looks really cool. That one I think is a tropical though. It comes back in our greenhouse, but parrot's feather, another good one. It will naturally float, but it also can be grown submerged. It's one of those that changes when it's under the water, submerged. And it also can be a great bog plant as well, in some gravel or just growing loosely in your bog. That's a good one if you don't want to go chasing stuff, because it doesn't have a really deep root structure, so you can pull it out of the gravel pretty easily. So the next question I get is where to buy plants. You can buy them locally, all right? Support small businesses. So we normally do have our meetings, or a lot of our meetings are at Water Garden Gyms, so you can walk out and purchase plants. Online, so where to get them locally, Water Garden Gyms, us at Rutter's Tropicals, that's a shameless plug. Online, so heads up, when you're buying things online, you have to pay for shipping. This is not, a little trinket. So depending on what you're buying, they're heavy and they're big. Like the Egyptian papyrus, USPS just changed their rules. Anything over, I think 36 inches or 24 inches one way, one measurement, is now like double shipping. So I used to be able to send Egyptian papyrus around like 5 feet tall, and it would cost like $20 to send one plant. So shipping on one plant is $20. I would charge $20 for the plant. And then, now it's double the shipping. So it's really hard to send, and really you're not, with the giant papyrus, it's not really sellable until it's at least 1.5 feet tall. You're not really getting much until it gets bigger than that. So it's actually really hard to ship. So some things might not be available online, or if they are, you got to order in bulk, which is what we do. So eBay, I haven't bought any plants on Amazon, but people say they do. They get, it's because of the way Amazon works, it's going to be a little different. eBay, you're buying directly from a person. Like we sell on eBay as well. I've bought on eBay, and typically, eBay, you got PayPal through there. So, if you buy something, remember, as good as we try to get what you see is what you get, it's a plant. And also you're shipping a live plant. So especially if it's in the summertime or in the cold in the winter, it can be hard to, we do our best shipping things, but there's always some error there, and a lot of times we've done everything we can. There's another family in New York called Virgin Water Gardens. If you're ever in New York, I think they're more like upstate. Check them out. They actually sell a bunch of lotuses. That's kind of their main thing. The wife of the guy, Mr. Virgin, is from Asia. And so her family still lives, I believe it is in China, and they export a lot of the lotuses from her family there. So it's kind of cool to see global trade on a small scale. That's where I got some of my first Amazon or Cruziana water lilies from. But if you're there, they have like a lotus fest every summer. And not only can you buy any lotus that you see there, from tiny little tabletop ones all the way to pretty large ones, but they also cook it. So, and she does the cooking. Yes, typically, yeah. Really the only thing that you run into problems on airplanes is gonna be like water. So if you have something that has to stay in water like a fish, you'd have to check that. You can carry some pretty silly things onto the airplane with you. I've done that. You can also check anything. My wife had diamond status at Delta the first few years that we lived here, and we had moved from South Carolina. So every Christmas we'd go home, and like one year we checked bedside tables as luggage. So, they do have some, there's some restrictions to what you can bring, but there's actually somebody, and again, even places like Hawaii, which have real big import restrictions bringing things back into America. Plumeria, for example, you can actually, you got a plan, but you can go to the ag department before you leave, and they will process your plants and make sure that they're safe. They call it getting a stamp, ag stamp on there. You can put them right on the plane. So somebody just did that coming back from Hawaii in the Plumeria group. So yeah, so same thing. I mentioned it's an international water garden show every year. So people will bring plants to that and, hey, keep this in case something bad happens to my pond. And they typically don't have a real big issue doing that. When you're traveling over borders, you might have a little bit bigger problem, but typically not. Or they can ship it to you as well. So there are a couple of problems people run into. Let's see if I need to click. There we go.
My name's Joe Summers. Along with my wife Tanya, we own and operate Chalilly. I wanted to share with you something that I found.
They're another online retailer.
Cleaning up the lilies. We have a problem in our region and throughout most of the United States with a moth that lays its eggs on our water lilies, and then that moth will take little C-shaped pieces of that leaf out and actually make a little boat. On this particular plant, this is a floating.
Has anybody ever seen that?
It's a classic shape or damage that we can see. So that little egg, once it hatched out, cut out a piece of that leaf. What he's actually doing is making a boat. Sometimes these are called China boatmen because the pest is called China mark moth. And he'll go and make 2 cuts on 2 leaves or on the same leaf and actually make a floating device so he can move about from plant to plant. And there he is. I've collected a couple to show you. Here's the second one. And this pest will just continue to multiply and continue to take chunks of your leaf out. So it can damage the plant. So what we do with that moth here is we just squish it.
Sorry, I should have given a. He said eat them, but he says they're like don't actually eat them. Your fish love them. Yeah, so I should have given a sensitivity warning on there and killed the bug. They directly will not kill a water lily. Like they don't bite it and envenomate it and kill it, right? But as he pointed out, you kind of see on that one, the more you have of them, and they do multiply, the more you have of them, the more they destroy that leaf. And think about the leaf, especially on a lily pad, that's its solar panel. And that's the only way that the plant down below is getting its energy, right? So if we start poking holes in that, pretty soon we're not gonna have any solar panels left. So Deb and I actually were at Water Garden Gyms last summer, and she had it on some of her water lilies. And a good way to get rid of them, if it's a small infestation like that, go around, pluck them off. Squish them. I always kind of grind them right up in the water. Your little fish will go crazy for them. If you have a really bad infestation, the best thing you can do is let that water lily start growing some, what we call the submerged leaves first. And then as soon as you see like 3 to 5 leaves coming up, go to the actual water lily itself, on the tuber, and start pinching off even what looks like good leaves. Because what he doesn't mention is that they hatch the eggs underneath the leaf, and then they go down inside the stem of the water lily. They don't go all the way down, so you go all the way down and you pinch it off and then let that dry out, dispose of it, throw it in a garbage bag, whatever. And then what will eventually happen is those new leaves will come up and they will be free of the China mark moth. You still need to be careful because any of the moths that did actually hatch are gonna try to come back and lay their eggs there. So that's just a couple of things. The other one that you might have is koi. Now, these are koi, and Greg Woodstock is showing here that these actually have been in this pond for about 20 years with water lilies. So you see they've got a natural bottom pond there with lots of rocks to dig into. But yeah, the koi, they are plant eaters. If we didn't feed them fish food, that's what they would eat, is vegetation. They love algae and plants. But you can see, look at all the water lilies in that koi pond. Now what I notice is there's not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fish, but there's a lot of plants. So sometimes we give our koi sacrificial plants or lettuce. You know, if you give them enough things to substitute that heavy protein food you're giving, a lot of times that will cause them to do something else. Watermelon, slice the watermelon about a 1/2 inch thick, put it in your pond, and they'll just go crazy for it. So things like that you can feed your fish. It's not a perfect solution, and there's a good example of tropicals right there. Look how many water lilies are off that one. So again, another trick, put some slate rocks on top of your water lily pots and then give them pots of rocks that they can chew on. That's what they love to do. That's why they have those barbs on the koi. They actually go around and dig in the dirt looking to scurry up little plant foods and things like that are in there. So now here's another suggestion. Now this one's $230, and if you'd like to spend that, I will make one for you. And but what they've done here, just kind of an example. I always talk about doing this type of thing, and I thought, hey, there's a great example of it right here from the internet. They're basically taking any type of container, and they're taking standard plastic like chicken wire here, and they're attaching it to the inside of that container, and then at the top, they're gonna go ahead and put some type of foam. We can use aquarium noodles, like you can get black aquarium noodles, especially around Halloween time. There are bigger ones that you can buy online. They're not too bad when you buy them in bulk. That's showing like a floating one where you could do some oxygenators and things like that, keep the fish out of them. You could easily do this with, the plastic mesh comes in up to like regular fence height, about 4 feet. Again, you could even attach multiple sections together. And you could give your plant somewhere nice to grow. I've seen people do a version of this with a flexible koi net, and then allow there to be, especially in a larger pond, a perimeter where the fish can't get in to get the water lily. Does it look as beautiful as a natural bottom pond with water lilies growing up? No, but you got your beautiful water lilies to look at, right? So you got that. All right, and that's all. Did anybody have any questions that we didn't answer during the presentation?
Oh, sensitive plant.
Yes,
You mentioned that.
I didn't, but it's there. Yep.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
So that's another good.
When the buddies run through and they close up.
And it'll grow. It's one kind of like the mosaic plant where it does anchor. So you can plant that even as like in that 6-inch zone of water. But the sensitive plant. So when you touch it, it closes up. So that's actually an aquatic plant as well. Yep. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's a perennial?
I want to say it's an annual. I haven't had it come back that I know of.
lot between.
These, I think, make little tiny yellow flowers. There's different varieties of it.
April and May. It's
The
gonna
mint
be
will do
third
that like
Saturday
pink
in
or purple
May,
kind of bushy
that
flower
day.
as well.
That
I
is
haven't
official
seen,
plan,
the
so
only
I
ones
don't
I've
know
seen
what
have
Deb's
the
got
little
planned
yellow
in
flowers.
April. And it's either gonna be at Lynn Lambrecht's house or at Geneva's, depending on whether her pond, she can fix a leak and some other issues. But, so you'll find out where it is. It'll either be out towards Seguin, or it'll be up in, was it Timberwood Park, Geneva? One of those two. And we've never been to Lynn's house, so I usually like to try to go to places we've never been. If anybody would like to host, I'll probably come around and ask you, the Christmas party, that's the one event we're still looking to fill this year. So it'd be the first Saturday in December will be the Christmas party this year, and looking for a volunteer. Does anybody else have some administrative things? The raffle, Katrina?
I do. Hi, Mary. Okay. I have the SNLs.
Oh.
These are the ones I designed a couple of years ago for the Water Garden Club, being demonstrated over here across the room.
I have one in my car.
Very nice.
They're very
We
nice.
have a spinner on them, and so they're $5, and we give the money to the pond club. And then I also have my personal medal that I use. Usually I use this one for trading when I'm at Fiesta events, and because we have the Weimaraner. This is the Happy Weimaraner Order of Los Tres Dogs. Also, I'll
Even
sell
though-
it for $5 and.
Even though we're down to 2 dogs.
Oh no.
Last time
In
we
spirit.
had an eclipse, we
The
did
third
a
one's in
potluck at
spirit.
our house.
I said the third one's in spirit.
Yeah.
Again, you are
Well, we're gonna be,
welcome.
one's real
It's
old.
RSVP.
Oh.
So I know there's a little flyer over here.
That.
I didn't correct the email address, sorry.
Oh, that's-
But we're gonna do a potluck.
My sister's family's coming into town from Colorado for
And
that.
it'll be fun.
To see the eclipse.
Yeah, that might actually be a good idea.
Some nice person brought potluck to my house and left these lovely items. I have this lovely wrap, which you know I love wraps.
Wow.
This lovely carrier.
That's
hat.
really nice.
It comes with Tupperware.
Wow. Oh yeah, that's mine.
That's the plate.
That's mine.
Who is this? It's yours.
Might be Deb's. If it's Deb's and she's not here to claim it, then it's yours.
Raffle it off, yeah.
As acting president, because Deb's not here, if that is Deb's, I say you can keep it. That's a finder's keeper. Or unless somebody claims it at the potluck.
Is that it, Katrina?
Wrap.
Katrina, is that it?
Oh, I'm not signed in.
Okay,
Thank-
Evie.
Just real quick, has everybody signed in?
Okay, thank you.